Hello everyone, welcome back to another album ranking. Today we're ranking every Slipknot album. Slipknot was one of the most influential nu metal bands, and I honestly think compared to the tone of a lot of other nu metal bands, it is incredibly unique. But anyway, let's jump straight into it with the worst album in my opinion. And it's probably Slipknot's only album that I can definitely say I don't like. And that is We Are Not Your Kind. Now this was a very different style to their older albums, and like if you like it, like sure, like cool, but like I don't like the direction they went with this album. The album The End So Far, which came out after this one and was actually last year, went in a similar direction to this album with being more modernized, but what I like about that album is that it doesn't feel like it's holding anything back from modern audiences. We Are Not Your Kind does border on that sometimes. I quite like the visual style of it, especially in like the music videos. I think the music videos are actually a highlight of this one. Like The Birth of Cruel has a vertical music video, which I think is actually really unique and something which I've never seen in a music video before. But it's also not a very good song. I like a few of the songs on there. I like Nero Forte, I like Red Flag, I like Solway Firth, but there aren't really any songs which I 100% love on here. And then there are a handful I just think are straight up bad, like Death Because of Death. That song sucks ass. I just don't like this album, but like, you know, if you like it, then I'm happy for you. So next up we got the third album, which is Subliminal Verses, which I don't think it's a bad album per se, but it's not one that I'm jumping to revisit anytime soon. Or at least not in its entirety. I will say Duality is a song which is actually very important to me, because it was my first Slipknot song, and honestly, I've like previously used that song as just like an outlet for my emotions. So like, I very much like Duality. I also like Before I Forget, Opium of the People, and Nameless is okay. But then there's a handful in here which I also don't really like Vermilion. I like the album cover quite a bit, but apart from that, I don't really have much to say on it. It's kind of a meh album. Now I will say the space between Subliminal Verses and this next one is quite big, because I actually do like this next one, and that is All Hope Is Gone. However, it's still kind of strange, because it feels like this album is 50% really meh whatever songs, and then 50% absolutely kick-ass bangers. Like, this album has some of the best Slipknot songs. You got Vendetta, Snuff, Psychosocial, and Sulfur. But then there's like Gehenna, The Cold Black, and The Butcher's Hook, which really aren't that good in my opinion. Even though the great songs in this album are only like 50% of it, I think I still like this album quite a bit just because of how great those few songs are. I think aesthetically and stylistically this album is pretty tonally pleasing, but also maybe not as much as some of the others. But whatever, I still like it quite a bit. This next album, I think people criticize it a lot more than it deserves, and that is The Great Chapter. I honestly think this is a really good and really consistent album. It opens with one of the best first tracks of any album, being 19. It has some other really great tracks like Sarcastrophe, Lech, Custer, The Devil in I. I love the use of so many little creepy sounds in this album, which is something which was very prominent in other Slipknot albums, but it feels extra prominent in this one. Things like the guitar screechings in Custer, and the sounds at the beginning of If the Rain Is What You Want. The one thing I will say about this album is that it is definitely on the longer side, and unlike with Iowa, you can kind of feel the length with this one a lot more, but it's not that big of an issue. Alright, next we're moving on to the newest album, The End So Far, and this is such a kick-ass album. The visual style is really good and matches the tone of the music perfectly. The music videos, the music videos are so good. It's doing a similar modernized thing to We Are Not Your Kind, but much better. I think Corey's new mask in this is one of the best redesigns he's ever had. It definitely feels more on the spectrum of their slightly older stuff than their newest stuff, which I do kind of like. Some of the standout tracks in this album is like Heirloom, Yen, Hive Mind, and Dying Song. I feel like compared to a lot of recent albums from metal bands that came out in the last 2 years or so, this is definitely one of the best. And so it all comes down to this: which one is better, the first or the second album? And I've recently realized that with the Metallica and the Michael Grommer's album rankings that I did, in both of those, the debut album was always second, so hopefully this time I can break that trend and not rank the debut album as second. Number 2 is Slipknot's debut album, Slipknot. This album is just such a good introduction to the band. It's very consistent, very fast paced, visual style is amazing, the music videos are great. It has an amazing first few tracks just with Sick, Eyeless, Wait and Bleed, and I love No Life as well. There are just so many amazing songs in this album. Compared to most of the later albums, this definitely feels the most like classic nu metal, with a lot more rapping sections. I say rapping, but it's very far from like the conventional hip-hop style of nu metal rapping, and more like this. The visual style is just so early 2000s with the masks and the clothes, and just like the way that the music videos are shot and stuff, and just as well as the tone and the pace of the music. I think maybe if I had to give a criticism, some of the songs sometimes feel a little bit similar to each other, but it's not really that big of an issue in my eyes. And finally we have Slipknot's magnum opus, Iowa. There is so much emotion packed into this. This is one angry fucking album. There are some amazing songs like Disaster Piece, Left Behind. One of my favorite Slipknot songs ever is probably Everything Ends. I also love the Heretic Anthem and People Equal Shit. There's just so many amazing songs here. This album has so much meaning behind it, and it's basically all about Corey's experience with growing up in the state of Iowa. This album was recorded while the band was going through a very depressive time with a lot of drug abuse and like alcoholism, and just a lot of personal experiences were going on. The opening track, 515, has a very dark story behind it, as it was essentially Corey letting out his emotions right after he found out that his granddad had died. The opening track is honestly just like mildly troubling just to even hear. The visual style is really good and it complements the music really nicely. This is definitely their longest album, but the just immense quality makes up for it 100%. And so that was my ranking for every Slipknot album. Please feel free to put your own in the comments. I'm interested to hear. Let me know if you want me to rank any more metal bands, and I will see you soon. Goodbye.